Welcome to Shelf Talkers, a podcast from Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Welcome back to Shelf Talkers. We are so excited for the episode we're about to present to you today. I am Jared. I'm here with my co-host and co-bookseller, Julia. How are you, Julia?
Hey, Jared. I'm great. I'm really love sitting with you. Listeners don't know you as well as I do because not only do we sell books at the bookshop, but we host this podcast.
We spend a lot of time together, Julia.
We do. A lot of texting.
Yes.
You're a comedian. Can you tell us what's that like outside of the bookshop?
I mean, I work at the bookstore part-time. I perform quite a bit. I'm traveling around every now and then. I go on a little Midwest tour where I'm from. I perform at least a few times a week around the LA area, and I sling some jokes out my back pocket. Yeah, that's the life for me.
If anybody is interested in coming and hang out with us, we do work on Thursdays, and it is actually something I look forward to. I look forward to at 8 o'clock. I come in at 8 a.m., and Jared comes in at 9 a.m., and I actually look at the clock, and I can't wait for him to come in
and tell you a story from my stand-up.
And then the rest of the day is just like jokes, and I'm feeling like I'm getting funnier, and you're funny, and it's great.
We have established a good riffing basis. I appreciate it. It's fun just coming in and being able to tell people like the weird, because sometimes the shows themselves that I do are the jokes. It feels like, like one time they brought me on stage and the guy paused for a solid, these are just like showcases around town, right? And the guy forgot my name, the host. I don't know how, right? That's his job, but it happens all the time. But he literally paused and he looked at me as I'm like walking up the stairs onto the stage, and he looks at me and he goes, "Give it up for Jason Cannonball." And I was like, "You're so close." And I actually that might be my new nickname. I don't know, Jason Cannonball. So those are the types of things I feel like I come in and I get to tell Julia just the wild ways that they say my name wrong, or just,
you guys,
the different antics.
That's a fully novel little story. Jason Cannonball's new persona.
I think whenever I look at our middle grade fiction section, I want to write this is a down the road aspiration of mine, because I just think middle grade fiction is so much fun. I'd love to write like a middle grade fiction mystery that's essentially like National Treasure, but like for kids. And I love that type of conspiracy history, mix it all together. But I want to make, at this point in my life, I think the main character will be called Jason Cannonball.
I think that's been written. It's been written for you.
It has been written.
Faded.
And Julia, what about you? Anything going on this week?
Yeah, this is of all the weeks, this is graduation week. We have a little display in front of the bookshop that congratulates all the graduators, graduates
at the different schools. We got UCLA, we got USC, we got SMC, we got all the LA area schools.
Indeed. So my partner, he is going to be graduating as a graduate, and we've been talking a lot about that. So he didn't get to graduate from college because of COVID. And I was wondering, where are you at with the graduation? I mean, with everything going on at USC, the president, Carol Folt, calling the police on the protesters, on her own students.
Wow.
And the faculty themselves. And of course, he's saying, I'm going to go to the graduation because it means something to my parents. They have yet to celebrate me as a graduate, as somebody that has graduated. So that's going to be...
That's special that you get to be part of that with him.
It will be, but there is a bit of turmoil that I have personally. I graduated last year, and to see my school unfurling and unraveling and really have a feeling of total disbelief in the system, truly. So that's what's going on with me. Graduation this week, and
yes,
so is the podcast with the one and only Samara Bay, because we're gonna be talking. We're gonna be talking about talking.
We're gonna be talking about talking, and talking about writing, and talking about how we can be better at all of those things together. Today we are joined by the 2023 best-selling author of the nonfiction book Permission to Speak: How to Change What Power Sounds Like, Starting With You, from Penguin Random House publishers Samara Bay. Samara's work has been in the New York Times Magazine, Time, CBS Sunday Morning, Tamron Hall, Fast Company, Glamour, and Entrepreneur Magazine. Prior to Permission to Speak, Samara has a background in speech and dialect coaching for actors. She's worked with Wonder Woman 1984 with Gal Gadot, American Crime Story Versace with Penelope Cruz and Edgar Ramirez, as well as Marvel's Infinity War. Have you ever heard of it? We are so thankful for Samara to be here to share her wisdom and learnings that she's had over the years. Samara, thank you so much for coming in.
My absolute pleasure. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here with you too. Thank you.
I mean, as two people that trying to make a profession out of talking.
Absolutely.
You're a perfect author.
Thank you. And welcome to all of us. I think that's what all of us are doing. In fact, one might say That's what almost all of us are doing in this day and age, whether we're, needing to for work or not, because the internet.
Yeah.
Because the internet is like not only the sort of requirements of, personal brand, but just the possibility that the public and the private are pretty close to each other. Like that used to be a big difference. I am now being seen in the public. Now it's like, I made a video and I put it online and a bunch of people saw it. I think I'm now a public person.
Right. We used to actually have a private life, but now we commodify our private life and try to sell it. And if you're a therapist, you gotta be on TikTok. If you're a business owner, you gotta be on TikTok.
I have a Substack now, which is my new favorite way of
Very cool.
going directly to readers instead of, ye old year and a half long process of waiting for book to come out. And last week's post was on self-promotion because there's such a completely understandable but profoundly unhelpful feeling people have around self-promotion, which is, as you say, not just for people who are launching a product or who have a service, but also for people who are 9-to-5ers. But their boss, walked into their office and was like, you should really be claiming your thought leadership on LinkedIn.
Dude, LinkedIn thought leaders, what a, anyway,
Instead
they might
of
be
writing
listening.
policy,
They might be listening.
instead of writing policy or building big businesses
Or asking that woman who's door they just knocked on, like, what would it look like for us to support your well-being at work?
Yeah.
No, please do more on LinkedIn.
Yeah, please have those like bulleted posts of like, here's what I learned, and then it's like they save it for the very end. Like the LinkedIn guru speak. Have you seen all that? That's how I kind of call it. The way they format that, it's such a unique thing. It's the last, really untapped social media for comedy. So, maybe I should be jumping into LinkedIn at the end of the day.
I mean,
I think they would kick me off. They would kick me off.
They would not, and you know it. And we would also embrace you. I think that actually LinkedIn is having, obviously I say this as a total just citizen.
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn is having a moment where everybody who was resistant to it because we're not 9-to-5ers are now on it and changing it.
Yes.
Okay.
This is my offer to you. We need you.
I was going to say, I find that the folks that I work for, that I'm also a producer outside of working at the bookstore. They are the type of companies that don't have LinkedIn's. So here we are.
Yeah. Where it's like one line and it's like, we produce or something like that. I mean, so we're here obviously today to most specifically talk about, in the context of books, in the context of writing. You had a book come out last year called Permission to Speak, How to Change What Power Sounds Like, starting with you. And you've seen around our store, we have all of these little shelf talkers, we call them. They go up on the shelves and they are a little description, but also like a vibe check for like, if this is your vibe, if this is what you like, you will also like this book. If you could write something like that for Permission to Speak, what would it say, or how would you pitch the book in that type of little 3x5 card setting?
Okay, here's my pitch. Permission to Speak is for literally anyone who's about to open their mouth and their heart is beating fast and they're realizing what they're about to say is a little closer to their heart than they realized or than they're used to. And they just need a little support. Because so much of our history of public speaking coaching, which I don't even mean like anyone here has necessarily been through it, although if you have, you know what I'm talking about. But I just think our like cultural story about public speaking is so fear-based and it's so get it right or else. And the or else is you will lose all credibility, you won't get the job, you won't get the yes, you will be laughed out of the tribe, and you will die alone like our cave person ancestors who were exiled. And I am suggesting with this book a more, dare I say, love-based approach to public speaking, where we are actually using every opportunity, whether it's LinkedIn or not, to talk like a person and allow the people listening to listen like people. And I'll tell you, the folks who this resonates with instantly tend to be women, people of color, queer folks, anybody who's ever thought of themselves as a weirdo or an outsider or a rebel. And we know in our bones, I'm weird, I don't belong, the norms aren't made for me. In many of our cases, the literal public wasn't built for me. So claiming that my voice is right and showing up in those spaces unapologetically is a radical act.
You know, reading your book allowed me to hear myself. I think out loud often, and it's something that I've been working on, hearing my own voice in my head, and just hearing you now play in the book Permission to Speak. helps me feel more at home and more at ease in my head, or or like I can hear my voice. I think reading this book has not only just helped me speak, but also helped me listen.
There is something about, and you said, what is this book like? And so if I were to have like a little shelf talker bit that's like this book is like, I want to bring in the voice of somebody like Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle or Oprah, where like this is a book on public speaking, but it's also not. It's a book about the voice in your own head, Julia. The voice in all of our heads, and how sometimes those voices aren't very kind to us for all kinds of completely understandable socialized reasons. And changing the way that we talk to ourselves changes the way we show up in the moments that matter. And by the moments that matter, I mean the moments where our actual destiny may very well be on the line. Maybe it's just a conversation like this, but maybe it's that presentation at work, or maybe it's choosing to actually run for office, or maybe it's just shakily raising your hand at a town hall and saying the thing and not saying the thing. But these are the moments, not the office politics, not the how you talk to your kid at home, although all of this is relevant, but those moments where the stakes are high and your heart is beating fast, when certain members of our society, for totally understandable socialized reasons, know how to just viscerally know how to own that moment. And some of us don't. And we are living in a world that was made by that. And so the subtitle, how to change what power sounds like, starting with you. The idea is, if power has traditionally sounded a certain way, like the voice of authority, if you Google what does authority sound like, or how do I sound more authoritative for that upcoming meeting, Google will tell you your voice should sound low. So your pitch should be much lower. And by the way, needless to say, men and women have different length vocal cords. So as with a string instrument, the bigger the vocal cord, the lower the sound. So women, around the country and around the world, all have this like one of our inner voices is, if I want to get taken seriously, I should unnaturally lower the sound, right? And we all make fun of Elizabeth Holmes, but the reality is many of us are doing some version of that anyway. Absolutely. And you know why? Google's telling us to. We haven't even Googled it. So if the voice of authority, if the sound of power is something that none of us have a name for, but we all just feel it, we all just grew up with it, it's a standard. And I just decided to name it so that we could then decide, well, what's a deviation from that standard? How do I sound? And what if I sound different than power has historically sounded? So now I just have to claim, like, I guess maybe this is the new sound of power. Because also the same story, there's a parallel to that story, which is that in almost every industry, we're hating our leaders.
Yeah. Wow.
So perhaps the sound of power goes along with a style of power that we as a global community have outgrown.
Wow.
I'm interested. So power, I think from your book, permission to speak is an announcement of the word articulate, circling around the idea that confidence is arbitrary. And I'm wondering, like, with these two concepts, articulation and confidence, how do we map our desire to be articulate and to feel confidence?
Are you saying like without it kind of being that like mimetic desire from culture, like informing what confidence means?
Like, yeah, and how do we change our minds? I mean, this is kind of the whole thing about your book, it's like read your book, but like how do we change our minds?
Read her book, everybody.
Yeah, read Permission to Speak, but on a very basic conversational level, how do you understand changing our minds on this idea of articulation or being perfectly articulate?
Yeah. Well, I'm a coach. So the answer is what works. And I have found that for almost all of us, perhaps all of us, if we go into some sort of a high stakes conversation that's unscripted, right? We haven't pre-written it. We worry on some level that we're not going to be articulate, that we're not going to speak in full paragraphs. Is that worry working? I think we all know the answer. We all just smiled. To go into any scenario going, I hope I don't F it up, is inevitably going to have an entire physical, chemical reaction that is in no way serving our mission. So then the question is, and this is why I alluded to folks like Brene, like, how does our psychology work? How do we hack ourselves?
Right.
Lovingly create the conditions for permission. And one of the ways that we create a condition for permission inside our actual body when we're about to talk is to remember that yes, we can is always and will always be more articulate than some much more complicated version of that uses SAT words. I'll also add that from working with actors, I know that so many of our favorite actors that seem so authentic on screen are artificially injecting in a sense of thinking in the moment. They're all memorized. But in order to sound like a human, they artificially inject the exact pauses and fragmented half thoughts that we are trying to avoid to be the slickest version of ourselves, who, by the way, will never be trustworthy.
What do you mean by that?
We will never engender trust in our listener if we try to come across as the slickest person who's ever spoken, and every thought that we have is already locked and loaded. Like, instantly you like me less. Instantly you connect with me less.
That's true.
So what I want to offer for any time that we think, oh, I'm not articulate enough. Listen, sometimes we are just socialized to be more of a like think in the moment. I'm not sure what I mean. Fine. Maybe that's our style. Maybe that is our version of the new sound of power. But the other thing is that all of us have options. So which version of ourselves is going to show up? The version that is inside of the constant self-monitoring of, am I saying the right thing? Or a version that feels free? And my invitation to get to that second half is this. Language wasn't made to be perfect. Each individual word that we're coming up with in the moment is our attempt to string words together to try to capture the spirit of the thought we're having on the inside, which doesn't exist in words. And so the stringing together of words out loud in real time with your listener is the beauty of human communication. When they nod, you know you're doing it right. When they don't, you go, that's okay. I have other words.
I wonder, getting into the writing of it, I mean, I almost feel like your approach to speaking can easily be infused into your approach to writing.
It's true. It's like you're looking for, this version. This is where the concept of mischief, I think, is a useful addition. So I love to bring in this concept. You can also think of it as play or joy or delight, right? I think most of us have visceral feelings about certain words that I just listed and less, juiciness about others. So pick yours. For me, I noticed that I connect instantly to my sense of inner mischief if I think of inner squirrely, like a little squirrely vibe inside of me. And it makes you're seeing it now, makes my shoulders like wiggle. And this matters, actually. I think we discount our joy or our mischief at our peril. I think the entire point of a fear-based approach to public speaking is that we are not centering our own joy and mischief. So if we are in the mode of wanting to change that story for ourselves, for our peers, for our children, what's your relationship to mischief?
I love that. And I think when I think about mischief, especially in the way that if you're just listening to this, she kind of moves her shoulders a little bit, and you can tell she's feeling a little playful. She's having a good time.
Relaxed.
I think I always kind of call it like cheeky. Like I love being a little cheeky. I think that's like my favorite moments where it's, as a married person, I know that when my wife and I are on a good page, we're both a little cheeky.
Yep.
We're having a good time.
I love that too, because there's also like a tiny bit of sexual energy in the word cheeky, which again, when we're talking about a professional voice, we're talking about somebody's really cut off from their neck down. So if we are interested in engaging in what it would be to bring our actual deep, each of our, when I say our, right, every single one of us listening and talking right now, if we bring our actual body wisdom, reading a room, seeing who's listening, seeing who might be open to connecting, and are you open to connecting back to them, right? Our bodies have so much to tell us, so much to like lead the way. And there are reasons why professionalism often is like, no, don't listen to your body. Just talk from up here. And by the way, don't breathe too deeply or you'll actually feel your real feelings. And the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you display your real feelings in front of real people, because then there will be consequences. And the reality is, I don't want to discount that there will be. And some major part of those consequences will be positive. Yes.
Yeah. In some settings, you're saying that there is a reason why our constructed understanding of professionalism is the way it is, because in some circumstances that might actually be helpful.
Completely. And
in many instances, it's actually harmful and we're holding ourselves back.
It's like a self-protective,
The
self-preservation.
self-protective is beautiful. And I think part of what is missing in a lot of conversations around how to sort of show up better in spaces is a real commitment to noticing when shame crops up.
Yeah.
So anything like, why haven't I gotten this right yet? Why haven't I figured this out? What's wrong with me? Why can't I hack it? Let's just be like so loving on ourselves that linguists will tell us every vocal habit we have ever picked up, we have picked up for a reason. It has served us in certain rooms, often to stay safe, to fast track to likability, to fast track to approval, to get entrance into that room, to get love, to get the job and not get the job. And often the moment that people are at when they're listening to a conversation like this or when they're picking up my book is a moment when, with just a hair extra power, now you have the job.
A hair extra mischief.
Right? With you're in some moment, and I'm speaking to you who this is resonating with right now.
I can see your mind's eye looking at the listener, and it's really cool to see, like, you're picturing who needs this.
There is, I just want to honor that moment of up-leveling is often a moment of I'm effing pissed at something. And I sometimes make it about me. I'm pissed at myself, right? For those of you listening. Why can't I figure out the rules of this office? But it may be something else. It may be that those habits you had that got you there aren't going to get you to the next place.
That's such an incredible invitation.
And the rules that, worked to get you there, love on them, honor them. Wow, we are so resilient. We humans are so able to read a room and make micro adjustments based on what that room needs to get some kind of, as they say, proximal power. And so I just want to honor that this work, and this connects to what you were saying about like some rooms, it won't feel safe. How do you know when you can be emotional and when can't you? This is very much justice work. Like, we are looking at public speaking through the lens of social justice. And so it is in no way appropriate or responsible for me as a coach to be like, ignore all of the reasons that you've learned to play safe. Nor is it responsible of me to say, let's just do what worked in the past, because I think you and I are up to more power. We're up to more mischief. We're up to changing the rules.
Well, even the way that you're just talking about the linguistic idea that whatever we picked up has allowed us to get to where we are. We pick them up because they enable us, because they empower us.
Or even coping mechanisms and safety mechanisms
Completely.
to get us where we are.
Yeah, and then also the idea of like pairing that with human resilience. It's almost a guarantee for, going back to the question of articulation, like this desire to be so articulate. It's like, no, it's already built in you. You already have that.
Right. So what are you
worried about?
What new invitations can we like pull from the air that give us a different vibe inside of our body, right? If the chemical reaction to like, I better not F this up is one thing, what's the chemical body reaction to, I can't get this wrong. I am the embodiment of the beauty of human communication in all of its messiness as soon as I open my mouth to speak. And let me just honor that the idea that I'm trying to get out is worth it.
Hearing the connection to social justice, I think when you're talking about that we want to empower the individuals, especially empower people who maybe have been marginalized in a public speaking scenario where somebody is afraid to be vulnerable or be themselves. Yes, we want to, coach in confidence, but it kind of feels like I'm hearing that there's a flip side of like, well, we want to also tell the systems that are going to shame the person if they don't do it perfectly. Hey, that's a super unhealthy way to have a society too.
This is deeply, deeply anti-bias training. And there's a sea change in how much funding there is for that. So, honoring that like DEI work is having a hard moment right now.
Sure.
But I just also want to offer that like on the list of biases that all of us listening is never voice bias. So I'm just introducing it, right? It's a term in linguistic circles, accent bias especially. And obviously as somebody who has a background working with English as a second language actors, I am deeply, deeply aware that even some of our most powerful and successful seeming, right, confident seeming celebrities, if English is their second language, they are privately having all kinds of doubts, all kinds of no matter what I do, I will still be seen as an immigrant. And nothing against being an immigrant, but I know that when the client said that to me, what they meant was, I am stuck in a box and I cannot get out. So if voice bias is real, then A, all of us are probably perpetuating it and can all do better. B, we may be perpetuating it on ourselves. We may be discounting how we sound before anyone else does. And C, yeah, we can gently, lovingly teach the powers that be, by which I mean often the leaders in our institutions, that it is physically possible for them to listen with, as I put it in the book, more generous ears.
To put it softly, I feel like.
I mean, but it's like, it's just human. Like, look, it's so human for us to us versus themify people. Like, we know this. This is psychology. It's fine.
And that also was a safety mechanism of kind of early human development.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally. So again, honor it. Wow, our brain goes real fast. Are they us or are they them? Because safety. And then we get to have our second wiser thought.
Because we're also not in a scenario where we are constantly physically in fear of harm. Like that element is for most people way less in our modern society.
Yeah, totally extinguished.
Totally extinguished.
I mean, I will say,
I feel like that's sarcasm, but I'm not saying totally extinguished.
I've been thinking about this a lot. How I do think some people do need to get slapped. But here we are. No, I have a question about just the actual writing of the book, because your background in acting comes out right now in front of us. When you say the word confidence, just the word, the way you said it, it made me understand that word so much more. Like confidence, how it could be a con. We're conning ourselves into feeling confident. And it's just by virtue of your expression of that word. But I want to think about, what was a specific moment? When were you like, let's write this book?
It was really sideways. I was in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2018. I was coaching Gal on Wonder Woman 2. It was just for that summer. Most of the movie happened in London with a different coach. But the part I remember most is that she had a lot of flying sequences, and but when she was flying, there was no words. And I am useless when there's no words. So I just had these days off wandering the streets of Washington, D.C. And that was the summer that we were 2 years into that gentleman's presidency. And we were hurtling towards our first midterms and hoping to change the narrative. And we were, trigger warning, but we were seeing all the pictures of the families getting separated at the border, and all of my activist friends were just like absolutely exhausted. And I was going to protest because I was in Washington, D.C. of all places. But I remember thinking the irony was not lost on me that I was working on this movie about, a superhero who comes from the heavens and saves the day. And I'm like, cool. That'd be nice. And in the midst of that, I got this call from MoveOn.org, and a friend had put me up for it. MoveOn is one of these great organizations that finds worthy candidates and then offers them resources, either money or training. And they had been looking for folks to jump in pro bono and just do, very unglamorous, but hopefully useful Zooms with all of these. That was the 2018 blue wave, but this was pre-blue wave, right? All of these first time, basically entirely female candidates. And I was like, literally sign me up. I've never done this before. But, the joke I had in my head was, well, I can't make them worse. And they had told me that the only advice they wanted to give was that these women seemed to generally be having trouble telling their origin story.
Huh.
And that did not mean where they came from, right? Their born and raised story. It meant the origin of the idea, the aha, that they were the ones who had to run. It's ironic because you asked me what my origin story was. So here's the answer. I was working with those women, and I was like, oh my God, they're exactly who we want to have lead us. They're literal, not just metaphorical, representatives of their community, right? Their lived experience sets them up to lead us well. And without exception, despite being absolutely magnificent, they were having trouble translating their magnificence onto the microphone, thinking about how to give their stump speeches, how to connect when they were sort of the scaled up version of themselves. And I had this aha that my actual mission in life is to help magnificent people show up magnificently in the moments that matter. That if we're going to change what power sounds like, I think I have a way in here. And my first thought after that was, is it a podcast? I don't know. So I did. I pitched a podcast to iHeartRadio. They bought it in the room. That seemed like good, intel. And then the very week that I pitched it, I met a literary agent. He walked into the women's co-working space, I should say, in Hollywood that men were welcome. Men were welcome, but they were not members. So this gentleman came in and he had like sexy New York architect glasses. And I was like, who is this? And I was literally just trying to pack up my stuff and leave the private room I had rented because I had just dialect coached someone because I knew my friend had a meeting afterwards. And she walked in with this guy and she said, my friend, who is the author Jessie Klein, said, oh my gosh, wait, David, you should totally meet Samara.
And then here we
I'm
go.
highlighting it because that was a moment she did not need to do. We were not that close. Our kids played soccer together, but she knew I was up to something. And then I ended up crashing their date.
She was up to some mischief.
She was up to some mischief. I crashed their date for like longer than I was comfortable doing. I remember I kept saying like, no, but I should leave you guys. And they kept asking questions and, bringing this stuff out of me. And it was underformed compared to how I talk about it now. But I was already like, as I put in the book, we were all functioning members of a dysfunctional society. So like, yay us that we've learned how to function, but at what cost? And I didn't know anyone, especially because I don't come into this through the business side. I didn't hear anyone in the public speaking space talking about this way. So he said, I'm going to go back to New York. I'm going to rope in my junior agent. We're going to hop on a Zoom and we're going to see if there's a book in you. And I had the voice inside my head. Just to be clear, I had the voice that was like, what? A book? Me? Ah. And instead, I took a deep breath and I said out loud, cool.
That's wonderful.
That's beautiful. I love the idea that there's a book in you. And the beauty of that voice of pulling, totally of pulling that beautiful voice that we have in that voice that we all need to share in some way.
And that deep breath can help you hear that yes in your head.
Oh, 100%.
No, but this is really interesting. So when around the same time, I think that you're having all of these ahas. I saw this 2019, it was a Netflix documentary. I saw it at a film festival that I was at. It's called Knock the House Down.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I reference it in the book.
Well, so AOC is on it, of course, and it documents her election as representative, her very first election. And there's this one scene, and I remember the scene so well. She looks at the camera and she says, when I'm excited, my voice goes up 2 octaves. So she said, I think she had just learned that she won. And so she started talking and she then caught herself, stopped herself literally from talking and enjoying and celebrating. She said, oh, when I get excited, my voice goes up 2 octaves. And I'm just like, what do you think about that?
Like self-editing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just yeah.
You know what it reminds me of is every single award show we have ever seen where somebody wins an award, which you have to imagine is like a big deal moment. We're all watching it for a reason, right? It's because these are big deal moments. We've decided these are like culturally important moments. And they won an award for their art. Like, pause for how powerful that is. We all know, like, putting something really vulnerable out there and then having people say we love it, that's awesome. And then they get up there, they receive their award, and then they say, quote unquote, I promised myself I wouldn't cry. Again, I totally understand the impulse, but my dare to anybody listening is, can we not promise ourselves that we won't have the correct emotions for the moment that we're in? Because when we decide, I'm going to show up with my actual feelings, A, we feel better, B, we feel in alignment with ourselves, and C, we are teaching everyone else in the room that they're allowed to also. It is a leadership move to show up with the emotions you actually have. And, I call this in the book caring out loud. I think it's the actual secret to authenticity, this word that gets way overused. And we're all just like, cool. Which version of myself? How do I be myself? Like, thanks for that advice that just shames me that I'm somehow showing up with someone who isn't me. Like, how do I switch? Breath. Love that. Love on ourselves. Yes. We're just all trying. For me to turn authenticity into something doable, because again, coach, practical, pragmatic, right? How do each of us talk about what we care about like we care about it? We all have so much, again, socialized training to say something matters to me, but then to say it like, or whatever. Right? So you even heard it in my voice. It's like, I'm not going to put any breath behind it. And like, it's just going to become monotone and maybe a little like vocal fry, just because like, it's like a big deal to me, but whatever. Right? It's self-protective. It's so totally understandably self-protective. And some of us also have, by the way, just to love on this, the opposite, which is that we're so used to because of customer service experience, over caring about something that we're kind of just like, here's an idea, but instead we're like, here's an idea. When I started recording the audiobook for my book, I thought I was doing such a beautiful job. And my amazing director was like, we stopped after the first paragraph or two, and she said, how do you feel? And I said, I think I feel really good. Like I'm kind of a warm up. I think I'm kind of a professional. And she said, bless. I'm fully owning this. She said, yeah, it was wonderful. Did it feel at all like you were pushing?
Oh.
I was like, now it did in retrospect.
like you're pushing a product.
Like there was it wasn't even that. It was just a tiny bit of the push in the voice, which is like, I'm not enough. I can't just say the thing. I have to show you that I've done the homework.
Yeah.
To really like do it's a muscling. There's a literal physical
like a vocal
muscle
pressure that kind of comes
yeah,
out.
but also it's an intentional pressure, right? Guys, you'll really like me if I,
Yeah.
I did it, to be fair, quite subtly, but the microphone, picks up the things. I love that she called me on that. It was super useful, but it was also like, I thought I was just showing up. But the reason I bring this up is that talking about what we care about, like we care about it, is actually something that requires practice, because most of us have a huge amount of practice in these other two extremes. On the one hand, caring about something, but being like, or whatever. Or on the other hand, putting so much extra, fuel on the fire that we're actually hiding in a different way. Now we're hiding by like being so big that we're kind of pushing people away instead of actually just breathing.
Yeah.
And caring about the thing as much as we really care about it.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting hearing that, and from my background of doing stand-up, that you can see so much of like the open micer to like, more confident comedian persona is that of, I'm acting like I don't really think these jokes are funny, but this is kind of what being funny is supposed to sound like, this kind of disaffected voice.
Yeah.
And then realizing like, no, I want to tell a story because I love this story, and I'm trying, and learning to fall into that voice. It's interesting to see that parallel.
Yes. Well, and even on the other extreme, right? I mean, I imagine there's other early career stand-ups who are like, let me land that joke. And you're like, wow, I feel how hard you're trying.
100%. Yeah. Well, sadly, I think we're going to have to get this thing tied up around here. I feel like I'm still thinking about one of your first comments about the reason power sounds like this is because it sustains the power systems it's in. And I just wanted to dive more into that kind of Marxist critique of all of this. And we didn't even get there. Maybe next time.
Yeah.
So our final question that we had kind of hinted at too, would you be willing to recommend a couple other books that you think people would enjoy if they enjoyed this conversation or enjoy your book? Permission to Speak, How to Change What Power Sounds Like, Starting With You by Samara Bay.
Oh my God, that's me. Okay. Here's a few that come to mind. A few that were super pivotal for me in the writing of this book. One is called Cassandra Speaks. The subtitle is something like, When Women Tell the Story, the Human Story Changes. So that's a thought. Related to that, there's this tiny, tiny book that should be required reading for everybody called Women and Power. Again, this doesn't have to be gendered, but I do think that the way in for women tends to be like so obvious that we're like, we're allowed to talk this way. So I like the permission of that. And then there's a few books I've just been, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this one. I don't know if she needs any extra shout outs because I feel like it's doing very well, but How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell.
Yeah, we have that very much in the store.
We have it very much in the store. I got a note from her over Instagram, which is how us authors are finding each other. The Instagram DMs are hot. And she said that she's been recommending my book to other authors on book tours.
Oh,
Wow.
And I'm like,
so smart.
I'm like, that's crazy because I was reading your book when I was writing mine and like had to put it down because I had to focus on my own thing and not just be like, oh, but her writing is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you for saying that, because that's, as a writer, I'm doing that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I can't read that.
No,
Too good.
I'll be totally honest. Another person that I recommend all the time, but also is like already out there and doing great, is Priya Parker and her book, The Art of Gathering. But I will totally say that I had to put that book down when I was writing too, because it's so good. It was hampering my sense of permission.
And you were just trying to emulate her style?
Totally, and I have the skills to do that. I'm an English major. I love the. I've loved my assignments throughout my school of like write the final chapter of Handmaid's Tale. Oh, okay. Suddenly, I'm like writing in the style of the cool. It's not the same thing,
Right.
as me.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Samara. We've really enjoyed this conversation. Everybody, check out Permission to Speak, How to Change What Power Sounds Like, starting with you. And if you're listening, and especially if you're a local, stick around for our quick audio newsletter of our upcoming happenings at Village Well. We've got readings, launches going on.
More book recommendations.
More book recommendation. This has been Shelf Talkers. I've been Jared.
I'm Julia.
And we've been here with Samara Bay. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I'm just like enjoying that you said you've been this whole time. You've been yourself.
Yeah.
I have been. Sometimes
I know, I love
won't
that
be.
part.
Maybe later
That's
I
my
won't
favorite
be.
part.
Listen, the world is your oyster.
I've been
Anything could
Jared,
happen.
but sometimes I've been Jerry. I don't know, you put on persona.
Hey, thanks for sticking around for our book recommendation segment of the pod, Culver New Cane. And today we are in this little studio, and it's just me and Jared. Actually.
Hello. Yeah, you thought you could get rid of me, but you cannot. Not today.
Well, you guys are not getting rid of me because I'll be the one that's recommending the
Absolutely.
book.
Yeah, so of course we've got our little event rundown of a couple events coming up in the Village Well calendar. But before we get to that, Julia, what's a book that you've adored recently that you want to recommend for our listeners?
So this is a book that I don't actually often recommend this book because it's so niche. But the book
I hear
is.
that. I hear that. I got those books.
Yeah, you definitely have
Wow.
those books.
Feels like there's subtext.
So the book is called How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. It was released. It's actually the debut novel of C. Pam Zhang. It was published in 2020, and people might recognize that name because C. Pam Zhang came out with a more recent book, Land of Milk and Honey, last year in 2023,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it is still. No, it's no longer a bestseller, but it was in our hardback.
It was for a while.
Yeah, for about the 3 or 4 months, which is generally the run.
Yeah.
So, again, her debut novel, How Much of These Hills is Gold, is about two sisters, one of whom is trans and becomes a brother. It's a retelling or rendering of Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, and they have to take their father's body and bury it while they're on the run. It's set in the frontier times, like the gold rush in California. What really captivated me about the novel is specifically the way that C. Pam Zhang writes. So she is actually originally from China. She's Chinese. She's native Chinese, but her it's obviously an English written novel, and it's so sharp and piercing. And it's almost like she writes as if she's writing it's almost screenwriting, and it's so visual and minimal in the writing that you can breeze through the book, but also feel deeply, poignantly touched because of the context, because of the nature of the story. I mean, it's very violent. His father dies, and it's frontier times, and they're Chinese, and so how much of these hills is gold by C. Pam Zhang. I recommend that to anybody that loves westerns during COVID. It came out during COVID, and I was reading all of Larry McMurtry's westerns, classic, and it came out. And at the time, I mean, people maybe know me as a screenwriter, and most of the screenplays that I write are are martial arts movies that are westerns. And so to have this book come out at the time, there's no martial arts, of course, but I was trying to imagine Chinese Americans in the past. It's just not something we imagine. It's not something we even see.
Yeah.
And then C. Pam Zhang comes out with this incredible book that blew me away and still does.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think it's really interesting to recommend this book right now, C. Pam Zhang's debut novel, because going back to the fact that I'm going to be at USC in 2 days following the release of this episode, C. Pam Zhang was slated to be a commencement speaker at USC School of Education, and as of last week or 2 weeks ago, C. Pam Zhang and there was another author too. They rescinded their invitation essentially, and wrote a letter about how they are not comfortable speaking at the commencement, specifically for USC's School of Education.
That sounds really fascinating. I love the passion. I love how you even knew what questions I was going to be asking you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, of course, we talk about our events here within this segment as well. If you've been at the store any length of time, you also see the fact that we've got 4 different book clubs. Every single Tuesday of a normal month that has 4 Tuesdays has a book club on that given night. We've got our sci-fi fantasy book club. We've got our original book club, which is mostly literary fiction, but it dabbles in other areas. We've got our environmentalist book club. And, of course, we've got our newest, our creativity book club. So all of these things, you can check those out on the website. Find a Tuesday of the month that works for you. Find a genre or a topic. They're all led by different Village Well booksellers, all passionate in their own way. So it's just been a really beautiful way to see the community evolve, take each other in. And we've just made Tuesdays our book club night. So check out that on the website if you are a local here in Culver City or the greater LA area. And until next time, keep reading.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Looking for links to the books mentioned in this episode of Shelf Talkers? Looking for ways to connect with this week's guest? Maybe you want to reach out to us about thoughts or questions for the podcast. For all of that, check out the show notes beneath the episode. You can also order your books online through villagewell.com. This episode of Shelf Talkers is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced, edited, and hosted by Julia Elizabeth Evans and Jared Casabon, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you in 2 weeks, and keep reading.